All right, so top 10 reasons why you might have been rejected after an on-site interview. And let's begin with the obvious ones. So the first one is you didn't have an answer to a question and you asked for another question, and it's as simple as that. Whenever you're applying for a high-performing company, you are expected to know, to have answers for pretty much any question. And if you don't have answers, you must at least show curiosity, show engagement, that you are really looking for an answer. So long story short, you should be serious about going above and beyond about finding an answer to a question. And just as a side note here, behavioral questions are designed in such a way that anyone has an answer for them. So this is reason number one. You did not prepare enough failure stories. And I know this from experience that many people tend to have one failure story and that's it for 5 hours of on-site interviewing, where, you know, I mean, it cannot only be about the positive things. So to keep it concise, the recommended dose of failure story should be from 3 to 5 for an on-site interview, depending on the seniority of the role. Reason number 3. You memorize things, you memorized the answer to many of the questions, you took all the list with the most commonly asked questions, so on and so forth, but you got asked some questions that were not part of that list, and that basically got you out of your comfort zone and you blocked. It's as simple as that. So obviously the advice here is never memorize stuff for on-site interviews. Number 4, you repeated the same story over and over again, and what happens here is that companies got smarter these days and they are taking many notes during the interview, so they will spot the fact that you employ the same story over and over again, which raises serious concerns over your preparation and your experience to get the job done. You don't have a diverse enough experience to be a good fit for the respective company. Number 5, and one of my favorite ones, you did actually prepare great answers for pretty much any possible question on paper, but you didn't properly role-play those answers. And to keep it concise again, you should invest at least 50% of the preparation time, especially for the behavioral part of the interview, for role-play. So there's a huge difference between a written answer, an answer you maybe record yourself, an answer you speak to someone else, another member of your family, there's a big difference when you speak your answer to a coach, for example, for someone who might have more knowledge on this topic. So needless to say, there's a huge difference between a written answer and a spoken one. Number 6, you thought you gave some pretty great answers, but you had no idea why they were asking you these questions in the first place. And this happens quite a lot, that people do not realize that these questions are more often than not linked with the company's values and for example, in the case of Amazon, with their famous 14 leadership principles. So when preparing for these types of questions, you should have those core values in mind and try to give answers that are tailored to those things and go hand in hand with the company's culture and values. And this is more important than you might expect in the case of an on-site interview. Number 7, you simply gave poor answers. Like, for example, your answers were hypothetical instead of a specific time you did something. Maybe your answers were not quantifiable, or maybe your answers were too long, or maybe your answers were too short, or maybe you forgot to talk about the results, or maybe you were just stubborn. You didn't listen enough to what they were really asking you. And you know, I won't put stubbornness into a certain age group, as I'm stubborn myself, but luckily for me, I'm not applying for a job here. But there are all sorts of things that differentiate good versus great answers. Like, for example, another one, you know, is a person that employs an Excel-like approach versus a narrative approach. If you would remember some of my early videos where I said, where Jeff Bezos actually said that at some point that they banned PowerPoint presentations from Amazon. In other words, they banned those bullet point lists, which, by the way, is completely false. But the main point here is that the more narrative the story is, the better it will sound, with the condition, of course, it makes sense. And of course, it could also happen that some people praise Amazon too much, especially in why Amazon, if they ask any such question. So long story short, ensure that your answer makes sense. Ensure your answer sounds good to you in the first place. Number 8. You got blocked when asked a tough question, particularly from a bar raiser. And I've seen I've heard many stories of this happening, but probably the more important thing is how do you overcome such situations? Well, you overcome such situations by showing curiosity and by being aware that this is something that might happen. So you must have a plan. Everyone reacts differently to uncertainty and ambiguity, and usually the bar raisers tend to ask more failure stories. So dealing with some such anxieties should be something that I believe anyone should prepare, especially for an on-site interview. Number 9, you are simply too negative in your answers. And this happens especially for the failure stories, where people, do not realize that what matters in a failure story the most is, number 1, being a genuine story, a genuine failure, a proper failure that you can own. And number 2, and maybe as important as number 1, is what you learn, how you grew from that experience. And that cannot be in a negative answer. So maybe an easy way to put it would be that always finish on a high note, on a positive note. And this doesn't only apply to failure story, but applies to pretty much any story, because the end goal is to sell yourself. And simply put, they are really looking for someone they would want to share their office space with. And number 10, you simply lacked in energy or curiosity, or simply put, engagement in the overall process. And just to be fair here, I've noticed the people that show curiosity, exhibit curiosity throughout my conversations with them or in my coaching sessions. They are 10 times, they are a lot more likely to get the job. And I know it's probably unfair for some people, but this happened, this worked for some reason. So think about it. Are you someone that exhibits curiosity and is usually has a high level of energy and can deliver with high energy for the whole duration of, 5 or 8 hours of an on-site interview? If not, then maybe you should work on that. Maybe you should ensure that you maybe do not deliver the highest level of energy throughout the process, but you keep a medium-high level throughout that on-site interview. So these were my 10 best reasons for which people get rejected from an on-site interview. Hopefully this was interesting information. And remember, if you want to support this channel, please also feel free to share your interview outcomes in the comment sections of the video. Thank you.